No, um, th- there was this three fellows that this was during the Depression, and people were out of jobs and everything else, and these three fellows worked, but they, in order to keep, they couldn't afford an apartment themselves, so they got an apartment in Tom's aunt's building. She had this 8-flat building. And it happened that I was at had a friend that was named Patricia, and she knew Pat. And when he was there, he said to Pat that he had some fella for me to meet, and they were having a party, a birthday party on Patricia, and so he asked if he could bring him. So it was Tom, Tom, and I wasn't anxious about meeting him or anything, and finally. I was dancing with this fellow. He was very attentive, stayed with me, and finally on the dance, when we were dancing, I said I was supposed to meet somebody here tonight. And he said, "You're dancing with them." So later on, after we were married, I found out that he had sat right by the door, that in case I was a lemon, out he was going, So he said he took one look at me, and that was it. So he asked me if I would care to go on another date, and I said no. So he said, "Well, give me your phone number." And at the time I was working different shifts at where they make popcorn. And it happened when I was going with him. For that month, I was working the 11 to 7 in the morning. So it meant that I had to be home from any date by 10 o'clock. And I said, "Well, I have to be home at 10 o'clock. My girlfriend's father was the manager. So he drove me and brought me home. So there was no, I didn't have to fear about leaving at 10 o'clock, be out 10 o'clock at night and that. So he wanted to get my phone number, and I didn't have any paper in my purse. And finally he found a scratch of paper, and then we didn't find a pencil. So I wrote then my phone number with my lipstick.
Oh my gosh.
And when he died, when he passed away, I was going through his wallet, and he still had that in his wallet. He was a very sentimental man, very sentimental. And you would have loved him, and he would have loved you, the girls. So anyway, we went together, and my mother said to me, "You're in love with Tom." And I wasn't going to get married because my mother my father was a very handsome man. In fact, people would turn around to look at him, women would turn around and look at him, and he was a cheater. He cheated on my mother. And just before, I was quite young then. I was about six or 7 years old, and I knew my mother was real bad. And then later on, I found out that she had miscarried a baby, and was very, very sick, almost died. So my father, I never saw him at all. I had to this day I had no use for him at all. And he never contributed towards us, my brother and I. Well, finally she came, and a neighbor that lived 4 doors down, she met him, and she married him, and his name was Bob Jones. But the whole thing there, my grandmother had the idea that I should keep my real name. And it made it tough for me in school because people thought I was a foster child. Like my mother would sign my report cards or something, or he did. Sometimes the father had to find, and she'd say, "Who was Robert Jones?" You know, and I said my stepfather, and it used to just go against the grain, you know. And he just acted like Bud and I just lived there. He paid no attention to us at all, you know. And there was no conversation. So then Mother had 5 children with him. And then it dawned on me, he didn't pay any attention to them either. So it wasn't just me. So on my 40th birthday, the family decided that Alice and Tom goes to all of their weddings, their child and everything, and they've never done anything for me. So they were going to celebrate my 40th birthday anniversary. And here comes Dad. I always call him Dad. Here comes Dad with a bouquet of roses, and he handed it to me. And then when they started to sing Happy Birthday, they were used to say something nice about me, you know. And Dad got up and handed the roses to me, and he said, "I never had one moment's worry for that girl." And I thought it took him till I was 40 years to get a compliment out of him, you know. So, but my grandfather, he was a step-grandfather also, and they lived upstairs. And I can remember I was going to the prom, and I wanted to shave under my arms. I had, it was just, you know, if you lift your arms, you would see it. And I asked Grandpa, I said, "Would you shave under my arms?" And out comes the cup, you know, that they used in those days. And he did, and in the meantime, he said, "What's this world coming to?" When they had to shave. And I was so thick, and I had to, you know, put it way out. So, but him, he passed away. He had prostate cancer, and Tom took care of him. He would take him to the hospital and all that. And my grandmother had passed away also. And to this day, what bothered me is that I never told him I loved him. But in those days, you didn't do that. If you loved somebody, I mean, it was a handshake, you know, but you never divulged it. So, like people do now. So that was what I felt bad about then. But your grandfather was a wonderful man. He and my mother got along beautiful. And Mother was the type of a person that this one liked this for supper, this one liked that for supper. She was cooking about three or four different suppers, you know, to satisfy them. And I made up my mind, my children are going to eat what's on the table. And she and Tom got along very, very well. In fact, if I had any disagreements with Tom, I could imagine. I never did have. We got along beautifully. I couldn't imagine, but if we had a disagreement and went home and told Mother about it, she would take his side. You know. So, but we were married. Went together for 1 full year, and tried to save $200. And we were going to rent an apartment in Tom Zann's building, and we figured that all up. And at that time, things like that were about 30. A bedroom set would run maybe about $32. I mean, that would be bed, dresser, and everything was, was really cheap. And after we were married a year, when I was a young girl, they had silent movies then. And every movie had a secretary in it. And I was determined that when I got married, I was going to get a secretary. So we figured out the budget after we got married. He made had a good job, but I was to get $2 a day, and that would be for breakfast, dinner, and supper. But you could go out at that time and get 6 pork chops for 32 cents.
Wow.
So within a year, I had saved $50. And I went to the furniture store, and I could tell there was a furniture bin there. And I was 19 years old. I got married at 18. And I went in there, and I could see the 2 guys, neither of them wanted to wait on me, and they said, what did you have in mind? I said, a secretary. So he showed me the secretary, and I said, I'll take it. And then he said, well, you'll need a chair. And I said, well, I don't have enough money with me for a chair. And he said, you've got cash? And I said, yes. He said, he got that chair, and he showed me the chair. It was $10.95 then. And it's all hand carved. They threw that in. And when I walked home, even though car fare was 7 cents then, we used to do a lot of walking. I walked home. There was the secretary outside waiting for them to bring it up there. So Tom came home, and the moment you opened the door, you could see the secretary. And he opened the door, and he said, just looked at it. And we had made the decision he could get loans from the Western Electric, but whatever we bought had to be paid for before we got anything else. And he said, do you think we could afford that? And I said, it's paid for. He said, how is it paid for? I said, well, I've been saving. I saved $50 and paid for it. So that's my secretary. And then there was never a mark on it, nothing, until I moved here and somebody scratched the top of it.
Oh.
No, the disc there. So I kind of blended it out with one of those things, but I was sick. To have something, since I'm 19, and have some yo-yo come here and do it. So that's the wedding picture. See, I was going to get married at 3 o'clock, and he had a fingertip veil, they had fingertip veils in those days, and a white dress. And then it just got so that everything was so expensive and that. So I thought, I talked to my mother, and so then I went and got that dress, and it was sort of a dark lavender, and I went, and it had velvet here, and I went next door. In those days they had hat stores, it's only hats, you know, and there was that hat that matched the velvet perfect. So that's the, and then the other picture was taken when I was a grandmother. I don't know when it was taken, but I knew I was a grandmother then. So I had a wonderful life with Grandpa. Wonderful life.
So cute. So, do you have any favorite times of you two together? Like
What dear?
any trips that you guys took that you remember with Tom?
What?
Like your trip to Niagara Falls? Can you tell that story?
He had wanted, for some reason or other, if I'm gone, I'm the worst traveler. I get sick. I get absolutely sick. And we made a couple of trips. We went down to Florida, took the road from Illinois down the river there, and then got around and got into Florida. Then we had to go up, and by the time I got there, I was so sick. And we found out then that short trips, like say maybe 3 days, I could handle that. So we would take like one time we took a trip down to in Illinois, and went through the house that Abraham Lincoln lived in, and went to where he's buried. He's buried there in Springfield, Illinois. So that was fine, you know. And then one time we went up to Michigan, and they have it where there was a certain part of Michigan that they at one time didn't even allow children because they used to make such a mess and all that. And you would get there, and then you had to cross this water, and you take this boat, you know, and that was very interesting. Then we drove down. So we found out that I could handle small trips. So then we went to the home of one of the presidents. He celebrates his birthday, and we celebrated a birthday. I forget his name. When you leave, I'll remember it. I'll call you up and
All
tell
right.
you. So we went through that. So those small trips were just fine. So, but he did want to go back to Ireland. You know, he when he was a boy, his mother died, and he was the oldest of 7, and the father just handed the kids out to whoever would take it. And then finally he was 12 years old at the time, took him to Ireland and deserted him, left him there. And this man that found him looking through the garbage can for food, brought him in. He owned this big hotel there in Queenstown. It was called Queenstown at the time. And took him in and fed him. And then he told Tom, he said, I can put you to work. But he said, you're going to work. He said, there's no fooling around. So he got to like Tom. He had 2 daughters and no boys. So then Tom would take what they called a skiff, and they would go out and meet the liners, the big liners, because they couldn't bring the liners in there. So the people would get on the skiff, and then they'd get there and go into the hotel. So Tom did that for 6 years, but he wanted to get back to Illinois. And his aunt, he wrote to his aunt, and she said, well, she'll lend him the money. And he got a job at Western Electric right away, and he paid her back, on time, but paid her back. And the Irish that come from the old country are very clannish. You have to be Irish. And one of his uncles, his father's brothers, came to visit Tom and I. And first thing he said, is she one of us? And I found out that my mother was half Irish, French. My grandmother was French, and her father was Irish. So they found out their name was Cahill, which is a very Irish name. But he always wanted to go back to Ireland, and that's the one thing I regret, that I didn't go with him, that he didn't go back, because he lived there for 6 years. And my sister went back there, and they said that it was exactly like I had described. Marlene, my sister in Florida. Sharon, her daughter, and said it was exactly like I had described. But I'm not a traveler, and I regretted that I didn't make the effort to go, because Ireland is quite a beautiful. I watched it on television one time, and the British hated the Irish from the time of Elizabeth I, and they would go over, and finally, just before they won their freedom from England, they used to go, and they would let prisoners out of jail, and they'd go and take a father out of the house and shoot him in front of the children and stuff like. Very British. Or else they would whip them and then pour salt in the wounds. Terrible. They had it on television one time about how they treated the Irish. So, but see, the people in Northern Ireland were British people that went there. So they were called the Orangemen. And it was quite a story about what the Irish went through. And also, the other day, they had it where the 100-year war between the French and Irish, England, a lot of them French moved to Ireland, and the Irish was so crowded, what they decided that they would build up, and that's where all these tree houses came from, and how they used to. It was quite an interesting thing. They said, well, if we can't have land, we'll have to build up. So that's where all those tree houses came, and how they put this moss on the roof so that it wouldn't blow off, and during the winter, if it rained, it wouldn't rain in. I found out more about Ireland on TV.
Huh. So, do you remember the lunch you had with Tom at the restaurant? Was it in Canada that you had lunch? I don't remember. Does that ring a bell?
It was.
You and Tom having lunch in Canada, and they came out with platters that were special. Yeah.
That was Niagara Falls.
Okay.
We visited Tom's aunt in Boston, and she suggested that we go up, in New York. When we hit New York, and all I could visualize New York and these tall buildings, And she said, no, the view was beautiful. It was beautiful going up north, and they had built this road, and it extended to Detroit, and they went further with it afterwards. And we were surprised with that, so we were at Niagara Falls, and this side of the American side was filthy, absolutely filthy. They finally got a seat at the table, and there was, they didn't even clean it off, and it just looked awful, and Tom said, come on, let's get out of here. So we went to the British side, and the men were in those uniforms that they wear, and just as polite as could be, and we had, they had to question you, and then they had, we asked him where we could he recommend a good place to eat, and he said, well, this hotel has one, and he said breakfast is probably over with. So we didn't it was about almost 12 o'clock, but he said, go up there, maybe they'll take care of you. So we went up there and told them that we wanted, and they sat us at a table where we could see the falls.
Mm-hmm.
Just beautiful. The view from there was just beautiful. And we said to them, Tom told them that we didn't have breakfast. Well, what did they do? They fixed bacon and eggs and ham and the most wonderful breakfast, and everything was served on silver plates, with the tops on it and all that. And they went way out of their way for us. And when it came for Tom to pay, he thought, this is going to cost a fortune. And it didn't. It was less than what it would have cost us on the American side.
Wow.
Less. So we left a real good tip, and they were amazed at us leaving a tip. I guess in Canada they don't do tip, So we just enjoyed that, and then we drove all along. But the whole thing is, we took that route from there to Detroit, and there wasn't a gas station, there wasn't anything. It was just all prairie. And I mean, all I could think is running out of gas. Yeah. And I said, because Tom was notorious for running out of gas. He said, I just filled it. Probably last month, you know. And so, anyway, we finally got to Detroit, and when we hit Detroit, it was dirty. We couldn't get out of Detroit fast enough.
Yeah,
So,
that's cool.
no, it was a memorable trip.
So, do you remember your friend who used to read books and eat cookies?
Who?
I don't remember her name, but she used to eat cookies every time she read a book, and then when you found books of hers later, she
Yeah.
had crumbs.
Yeah. We were, we knew each other since we were 3 years old. We lived across the street, and what happened is, that was when families didn't own cars. It was the street cars, you know, they couldn't afford the cars. And her mother would bring Helen across the street, and then my mother would bring her back, you know, just bring her on the curb, and then she could make it into the house. And afterwards, she couldn't bake or anything. She was a terrible cook. She didn't care for cooking at all. And when we used to go to the public library and get books, and she was a fast reader. Like with me, I read every word, and if I don't know a word, I look it up in the dictionary. And she skims through, and she knows what she read, you know. We could talk about it, and what she did, she would sit at the table like this with her hand, and then eat cookies. And a lot of times when I'd get a book back, turn the page, there was crumbs in the thing. And it ended up that she was almost blind in that eye. She didn't use it. She had to go and have them take special exercise just for that was the way she sat.
Wow.
And she ended up with but she was she ended up with cancer that ran in the family, and she feared it. So I lost her, and I lost a very good friend. I still pray for her, you know, Helen. And we were very good friends.
Did you have any other stories that you wanted to tell? I don't know if you had any like special ones from your life.
Well, I had 2 guys that proposed to me.
Yeah, tell that story. We want to hear.
I had Tom's boss called, and he used to call me every Saturday after Tom had passed away to see how I was doing. And then finally, after a year, he started talking about getting a condominium, and and I thought what he was telling me was he used to go to these senior citizens meetings and that, and I thought he had met some gal there, and he was telling me about it. And he said, would you be happy with that? And I had all I could do to keep from laughing, you know. And he was going to come out, and we talk about it. And he got this cancer where you go real fast. And but I wouldn't be able to marry him because he had a daughter that was obese, and he was married to a woman that bossed him something terrible. I mean, it was her decisions, and he took the easy way out and just let her do what she wanted, and then he had a son that married a Mexican girl, and the daughter didn't work, and the son didn't work either. Neither of them worked a day in their life, and they had a baby, and the mother put them in apartments. So that wouldn't go with me. I mean, they would resent me also.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, to have two lazy people that didn't work a day in their life. So I wouldn't have married him anyway. But he was a millionaire,
Wow.
and he died, and I thought afterwards, I missed the boat. And he was a lovely man. I mean, I really liked him a lot, but I just, it was the family that would stop
Mhm.
me, you know. And then I had this guy next door that he was Mexican, and all he talked about is his conquest. That's all he could talk about. And one day he grabbed me, and I said, boy, don't we feel frisky, and jumped away, and he said, I'll never touch you again. Like he was punishing me, you know, for not touching me. And a while went by, and finally he said, I apologize, Alice. He said, I know you were a lady, and I shouldn't have done that. He said, can I come over? So, but that was out too. He thought he could marry me, and I said no. I couldn't imagine being with anybody except Tom.
Yeah.
I'm a one-man gal. So he's gone 30 years, over 30
Wow.
years. So,
That's sweet though.
what dear?
That's sweet though. You had one guy, and
Yes.
he was the one.
Yes. No. Well, your mother will be the same way.
Mm-hmm.
She'll be the same way. I've got 8 I have 8 grandchildren that are really wonderful. And your grandmother married
Yeah.
a Patrick.
Yeah.
Have you heard about Patrick?
No.
Mm-mm.
He's after her money and nothing else.
So she has none.
She had a stroke,
Oh, okay.
fell down the stairs.
What did happen?
It's my dad's mom.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Diane had been there to Hawaii, and she had a home that was out of this world. It was the most beautiful home that she had ever seen. And he had a so-so home. And he was married to a woman that was in a wheelchair then. There was an author. And her children, she left a will that her children, any royalties from her work, her children would get it. And I don't know, I think she had a boy and a girl or something. And he took all of that. He was her husband, so he had the right to the royalties. but he wasn't married to her, you know, at the time. So he gypped them out of the royalties. And then Marilyn met him, and then he started on me. You know what he did to me, put me in here, which was a blessing. So I mean, it turned out to be a blessing. And I lived in the home that Marilyn owned, and she told him that the whole time that I lived there, I didn't pay 1 penny's rent. And I paid $700 a month plus the gardener, which was $55. So I was paying that much money a month, and then being blamed that I didn't pay for a penny. So I could have cinched that because your mother found receipts
to prove
that I had that I could prove, but I don't work that way. So I just, and then the last thing was that wanted to know about the furniture. What happened to the furniture? She didn't buy. My daughter's an alcoholic, and she did so much for me. And when they sent out this paper to people that I knew and all that, about how all that Marilyn did for me and how ungrateful I was, and they knew the situation, so it backfired for them. Instead of, you know,
right.
Yes, people called. She was a lovely person when she was young,
Yeah.
but drinking can really change a person. I don't know why they do. Beautiful children. That's their pictures up there.
She's so pretty. And she had my dad, so that was good.
But you?
She had my dad, so that's good.
Yes. Oh yes. Oh yes. Yes.
Who had you?
No.
That's her in the yellow behind.
That's 4 generations there. That is Marilyn in the yellow.
Okay.
And the girl, her daughter, got the 4 generations together. And that was quite a hard thing to get them. And I'll have to ask your father, because, you know, your mother and father lived near Boston. If he came from Boston, I don't think he did. I think he was here. And that little one down there, she's a lawyer. And she passed the first time. Usually lawyers, they don't pass you the first time. So she's quite a wit.
Yeah. How old is she now?
What? It's hard to tell.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think.
But you know what we did, and what worked beautiful. We would your Rick, your grandfather, would dump off three of them at a time sometime. And we were living in an apartment at the time, and I was working. I was working for Dr. Milek at the time. And that meant that on Saturday and Sunday, I had washing to do. I had a lot of work to do. And also, that's the time that we would get tickets to go to see plays and that. And your father, he would just drop them, grandfather would just drop them off, and like he was doing us a big favor.
Right.
And finally then, I couldn't pay any attention, give them much attention, and Dennis was hyper, very hyper. And finally then we made the rule that we'll take one at a time. And they knew when it was their turn.
Mm-hmm.
And your father, what he liked to do, we lived in Geneva, and the Fox River ran through there, and it was full of ducks.
He still
And
loves
there
that.
was a restaurant, the most wonderful restaurant, close by, and they would put cans of bread in that, that was left on the table. They couldn't use it again, of
Mhm.
course, and feed it to the ducks. So Grandpa would go when it was your father's time, bring him home, and he'd say, when we get home, he'd say, well, what do you want to do? I want to go to the bridge, and I want to throw bread at the ducks. The bridge.
Which?
They were all. We enjoyed them. We enjoyed them more so that way because you got to
Right.
get their character and all that. And Dennis was very tough to have, and you wouldn't know what you had to watch him all the time. And this one time, we had him, and Marilyn was having another baby, and so they brought the crib up for him to sleep in. And we lived on the 3rd floor at the time in an apartment building. And Tom came over from work, and Dennis, you just tired Al. I'm sound asleep, and he's sound asleep, and I'm holding on to the crib. So I had visions of him hitting the window and falling 3 floors down, So, but now Donald, he was very much for me. He still is to this day, and you should hear him with this Patrick. He was ready to go to Hawaii and beat the hell out of him. So for what he was doing to me, and this one time I said to him, "Oh, you're a Dummkopf." It's German for
Uh-huh.
And he said, "My no Dummkopf, my Donald." So. But no, I have a good relationship with my grandchildren.
Mm-hmm.
Patrick called each of them up, and it was either your grandmother or your mother. So they choose their grandmother.
Wow.
That Patrick baffles me. I mean, I can't
I know.
imagine someone being like that.
I know. I don't understand.
I mean, why pick on a 90-year a woman?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm almost 90.
You are 97.
I am 97, and I mean, it shows like he couldn't handle a man,
Yeah.
so he
He
picks
picks on you.
on me. But the last time he called was he wanted to know what I did with the furniture. He said you couldn't call your daughter up and ask her if she wanted something. I said, what did she do with my junk?
Mm-hmm.
And well, to begin with, imagine what it would cost to ship it
Exactly.
to Hawaii. You could get something, unless she got, Tom gave me a beautiful necklace. It was out of this world. And it looked like it was one of these old-fashioned necklaces. And
Wow.
she always talked about that. That's hers. And I said, yes, that's yours. And I promised it to her. And when she came out to the house one time, I gave it to her. So she's got that. And that is priceless.
Yeah.
So I forgot about that. I should have said to him, well, she got the necklace, but she always wanted. No amount of furniture would compare with
Right.
that because it's so beautiful. I try to be, you know, but you know what amazes me? I sit here and I can't believe that, I had where I was out of my mind, honey. And a brain seizure is what they called it, where I didn't know anything when I moved in here. And I sit here and I just amazed at that I took the furniture that I did.
Mhm. Yeah.
Now the bells, I promised to Douglas. And I talked to him one day, and I guess his mother had him brainwashed about how terrible I was and all that,
Mhm.
So I told him, I said, Douglas, I said, when I go, I said, I said to him, I said, do you still want the bells? Because he was just a young man. And he said, Grandma, he says, I want them bells in the cabinet. And I said, okay, that's yours. And then Donald wanted the clock. I had a grandfather's
Mhm.
clock. He's got that.
He has
and
it.
It's working,
Good.
So, and this, I remember you bringing this up,
Yeah.
and I couldn't ask for anything better there.
It's perfect.
So Diane wants something too. And then that Irish Belique, that's worth an
It's
awful
beautiful.
lot of money. An awful lot. That harp there alone, I think, is worth about $400 or $500.
Wow. It's beautiful.
Yes, beautiful.
It's beautiful.
Belique.
You have it displayed so well. It's
Everything.
Wonderful. It's perfect.
And the time that I wanted my desk, that I wanted for, I can remember, I was 19 years old when I
Yeah.
bought it. And your mother and father were here, and to begin with, when I came in the room, your mother had the furniture arranged different than I would have it, and in here too.
Mhm.
And I didn't want to hurt her feelings,
Uh-huh.
and I didn't know how to handle it. So finally I said to her, would you mind if I change the furniture? No, fix it the way you want it. And everything that I did, she looked at your father and she said, see, it looks so much nicer. Well, when they brought the desk, they put it flat against the wall.
Oh.
And I looked at it, and of course I knew I couldn't push it out. So I said, put it on the corner, and they looked at one another and said, see? They agreed
Yeah.
with wherever I pushed it. And then they had, I don't know, this was on this side, and I had to put it over here and then put this here. So whatever I did, they
Yeah.
agreed with it.
It looks
Yes.
perfect.
Mhm.
I love it. Great.
And those things in the corner there where the roses are,
Uh-huh.
I had that painting, I got that in Geneva. It was a woman that she was principal of the school, and she'd retired, and she always wanted to paint. It was in the paper about her, and they had every now and then they would have where you would take all of your doodads or stuff that you made, and you wanted to make money out of it. They would have that a day once a year. So I read the article and I went there and I spied that paintings there. And I said to the woman, I said, is this for sale? She said, oh yes. And it was her first sale
Wow.
that I ever had. And she wanted to give it to me. And I said, oh no, I can't. I said, it's $50. She said, oh yes. Well, I didn't have $50 on me, I had 40. Well, she wanted to take the 40 and call. I said, no, it's worth the 50. I just felt that I couldn't take it. So I got that. So when we were hanging that up, your mother happened to see those roses. And that is in an antique picture. That picture is an antique.
So pretty.
Yeah.
And the harp next to it.
What, dear?
You have the little harp next to it.
Yes, yes. That's the one thing that Marilyn bought me that showed any sentimentality. She went to Ireland and she went through Waterford Crystal, and she kept the man there and got that Irish harp and had him print Mom on it.
Oh, that is sweet.
That. I mean, isn't that awful to say that she's that age and
Right.
it took her that long to do something? I probably she doesn't even remember getting it.
Yeah.
So
And that dish right there, the bowl.
Now that bowl there, that's a year older than me. So it's going to
Almost 100.
yeah, and that bowl, my mother, it used to be, there was no paper napkins or anything like that. It was all real napkins where you had to iron it, you know, and linen, that's tough ironing. And she would put a tablecloth on, a cloth for our dinner, and then afterwards she would take that cloth off and put it in what we called the rag bag. There wasn't rags in it, but they called it the rag bag. And then put that on the table, and I thought it was a monstrosity. I couldn't stand it. And then when she died, I got there, and nobody wanted it.
Wow.
But it meant something to me. And
It's beautiful.
I was telling your mother about it, and so she's going to pass it on to you.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yes. Yeah.
I don't know how they have the flower design in the
Well,
crystal.
you see what happened. There was a time during one of the wars in France. That's where a lot of your beautiful china and came from, and England. And they couldn't make it, and in America, that was a bowl that was frowned upon because it was made here. It was a substitute. And now people are realizing how valuable it is. Yes. And that Wedgwood, that's very expensive too.
So nice.
Wedgwood.
I everything you have in here has meaning, and it's wonderful.
Yes, everything.
And-
I sit here and then all of those books,
Uh-huh.
they're all classics. And some of them I paid as much as $25 a piece.
Wow, almost as much as the secretary.
They go with the secretary. Yes. Sharon wants that. She's going to pay for the shipping,
Really?
like into Florida. Mhm. Yeah. And what she wants is my baby picture.
Oh, really? It's cute.
My grandmother had that hanging over her bed, and at the bottom it broke off, but when I was young, it had like a curly thing at the bottom. And what she had a piece of my hair, cut my hair with pink ribbon and had it tied there,
Aw,
and that was over her bed.
that's so
Mhm.
sweet.
So I mean, this everything is memories.
Mm-hmm.
And that cross there, that was on Tom's casket.
Oh,
It's going to go on mine.
that's sweet.
Yeah.
Mm. Okay, we have to go, but thank you.
Oh.
We'll come back.